Commander Jake Morrison stared at the stars through the viewport of his ship. The year was 2387, and space travel had become normal for humans. But Jake knew that most aliens still thought humans were just kids playing with toys they did not understand. The ship Meridian was not big or fancy. It was a simple exploration vessel with a crew of only 4 people. Jake had been flying these missions for 10 years, and most of them were boring. They would scan empty space, check on dead planets, and file reports that nobody read. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the navigation station. She was young but smart, and Jake trusted her completely. Chief Engineer Pete Collins worked in the engine room, keeping their old ship running with spare parts and hope. Dr. Helen Wright was their science officer, always excited about finding new rocks or gas clouds that looked just like all the other rocks and gas clouds they had seen before. The Kepler Nebula stretched out before them like a colorful cloud. It was beautiful, but Jake had learned that beautiful places in space were usually just as empty as ugly ones. The alien races had already explored most of the good spots. Humans got the leftovers. The galaxy was ruled by 3 major powers. The Zephyrian Empire was known for being incredibly smart and logical. They could solve any problem with math and science, but they thought emotions were weakness. The Crystalline Collective was different. They were all connected to each other in some kind of group mind, sharing thoughts and feelings. They worked together perfectly, but they all thought exactly the same way. The Void Watchers were the oldest and most mysterious. They had been around for thousands of years, watching everything but rarely speaking to anyone. All 3 of these alien groups treated humans like children. They would trade with Earth, but they made it clear that humans were not important. Humans were too young, too emotional, and too chaotic to matter in galactic politics. Jake did not like this attitude, but he understood it. Humans had only been in space for a few hundred years. The aliens had been building star empires when humans were still living in caves. From their point of view, humans probably did look like babies. Amy looked up from her console. "Commander, I'm getting some strange readings from Sector 7. Jake walked over to look at her screen. The normal scan showed empty space with a few asteroids floating around. But there was something else there. An energy signature that was bigger than anything he had ever seen. "What kind of energy?" Jake asked. "I don't know, sir. It's not like anything in our database. The readings are off the charts." Pete's voice came through the COM system from the engine room. "Hey boss, whatever that thing is, it's making our instruments go crazy down here. My power readings are jumping all over the place." Dr. Wright hurried over to look at the data. Her eyes got wide as she studied the numbers. "Jake, this is impossible. The energy output I'm seeing here would require a power source bigger than our sun." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. In 10 years of exploration, they had never found anything really interesting. Most of their discoveries were just new types of space dust or dead comets, but this was different. "Set course for the energy source," Jake ordered. "Let's go see what we found." The Meridian turned toward the asteroid field. As they got closer, Jake could see that the asteroids were arranged in a strange pattern. They formed almost perfect circles around something in the center. Double quotes Amy. "Can you scan through those rocks?" Jake asked. "I'm trying, sir, but something is blocking our scans. Wait. I think I see something. It's big, really big." Jake looked at the main screen as Amy adjusted the sensors. Slowly, an image appeared that made everyone on the bridge stop talking. It was a ship, but not like any ship Jake had ever seen. It was huge, easily 10 times bigger than the largest Earth warship. The design was beautiful and strange. It had smooth, curved lines that flowed like water, but also sharp geometric patterns that looked like complex math equations. The material looked like metal, but it seemed to shine with its own inner light. "How old is that thing?" Jake whispered. "Doctor Wright was already running tests, the carbon dating shows. This can't be right. Jake, according to these readings, that ship is over 50,000 years old. Jake felt cold. 50,000 years was older than any known civilization. Even the Void Watchers, the oldest species they knew about, had only been around for 30,000 years. Could it be natural? Amy asked. Maybe some kind of crystal formation? Dr. Wright shook her head. No way. Look at the structure. Those patterns are too complex and too perfect. Someone built this thing. Jake knew what he had to do, but he also knew it would change everything. Once word got out about this discovery, every major power in the galaxy would come running. The peaceful little mission would turn into a circus. Amy, send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we found something big and we need backup. Pete, I want this ship running at full power. If we're about to have company, I want to be ready to run if we need to. What about the alien governments? Dr. Wright asked. Don't we have to report this to them too? Jake thought about it. The law said that major discoveries had to be shared with all galactic powers. But the law also said that the discoverer got first rights to study their find. Jake decided to push that rule as far as he could. We'll follow the law, Jake said. But we're going to take our time doing it. Over the next few hours, Jake watched his quiet little ship turn into the center of attention for the entire galaxy. First, Earth Command sent 3 warships to protect the site. Then the Zephyrian Empire showed up with a massive science vessel called the Logic Prime. The Crystalline Collective arrived in a ship that looked like it was made of living crystal and sang with harmonic vibrations. Finally, the mysterious Void Watchers appeared in a black ship that seemed to absorb light instead of reflecting it. Supreme Researcher Veltar of the Zephyrians was the first to contact Jake. The alien looked like a tall, thin human, but with gray skin and large black eyes. When he spoke, his voice had no emotion at all. Human Commander Morrison, Veltar said through the communication system. This discovery is far too important to be handled by your primitive species. We will take control of the research immediately. Before Jake could answer, the Crystalline Collective sent their own message. Their representative looked like a living statue made of blue crystal. When it spoke, the voice sounded like many people talking at once. The ancient vessel calls to us through harmonic resonance, the collective said. We shall study it as one mind, as it was meant to be studied. Finally, the Void Watchers sent a simple message. Their representative appeared as a figure in a dark robe, with a face that could not be clearly seen. This ship belongs to the deep past, the Watcher said. We claim it by right of age and wisdom. Jake looked around his small bridge at his crew. Amy looked worried. Pete looked angry. Dr. Wright looked excited despite the tension. Well, Jake said quietly, I guess we're about to find out who really runs this galaxy. Outside the viewport, the ancient ship waited in silence, keeping its secrets locked away after 50,000 years of waiting. Jake had no idea that it was waiting specifically for him. 3 months had passed since the discovery of the ancient ship. Jake Morrison watched from his small quarters on the Meridian as the alien fleets worked around the clock to unlock the vessel's secrets. The space around the asteroid field now looked like a busy construction site, with ships from 3 different civilizations, trying everything they could think of. The Zephyrians had brought their most advanced scanning equipment. Their massive science vessel, the Logic Prime, fired different types of energy beams at the ancient ship every day. They used mathematical formulas that could break down the structure of planets, but the ship showed no response. Supreme Researcher Veltar had started to look frustrated, though he tried to hide it behind his cold, logical manner. The Crystalline Collective had taken a different approach. They had arranged their ships in a perfect circle around the ancient vessel and were sending harmonic vibrations toward it. The sound was beautiful, like 1,000 voices singing together, but it had no effect. The collective's crystal ships glowed brighter each day as they increased their efforts, but the ancient ship remained dark and silent. The Void Watchers were the most mysterious in their attempts. Their black ships moved around the vessel in patterns that hurt to watch. They used technologies that the other races did not understand, pulling energy from somewhere else and directing it at the ship. But even their ancient knowledge could not wake the sleeping giant. Jake's crew had been pushed aside completely. The alien powers treated them like children who had found something too dangerous to touch. They were allowed to watch, but not to help. Jake spent most of his time writing reports that nobody would read and trying to keep his crew from going crazy with boredom. Amy Rodriguez had started learning the alien languages by listening to their communications. She was getting good at understanding Zephyrian logic speak and the musical tones of the crystalline collective. Pete Collins worked on their ship's engines, making improvements that would help them run away faster if things went bad. Dr. Helen Wright studied all the data she could get about the alien research, looking for patterns that others might miss. Tension between the alien fleets was getting worse every day. The Zephyrians thought the crystalline collective was being too emotional in their approach. The collective believed the Zephyrians were too cold and mathematical to understand something so ancient. The Void Watchers looked down on both younger races, claiming that only they had the wisdom to properly study the vessel. Arguments broke out regularly. Ships would position themselves aggressively, weapons would power up, and for a few minutes it would look like a war might start. Then cooler minds would prevail, and everyone would go back to their failed experiments. Dr. Wright knocked on Jake's door one evening. She looked tired but excited. "Jake, I've been studying all their attempts," she said. "I think I know why nothing is working." Jake looked up from his reports. "What do you mean?" "They're all trying to force the ship to respond. The Zephyrians are hitting it with logic and mathematics. The collective is trying to harmonize with it. The Void Watchers are using some kind of ancient ritual. But what if the ship doesn't want to be forced?" "What are you suggesting?" Helen sat down and pulled out her tablet. "What if the ship is waiting for something specific? What if it needs to recognize something before it will wake up?" Jake thought about this. "Recognize what? I don't know. Maybe a certain type of technology. Maybe a specific signal. Maybe." Helen paused. "Maybe a certain type of person." Before Jake could respond, Amy's voice came through the COM system. "Commander, Morrison to the bridge, please. We have a situation." Jake and Helen hurried to the bridge. Amy was listening to the alien communications, and she looked worried. "What's happening?" Jake asked. "The alien fleets are getting ready to give up," Amy said. "They've been talking about it for hours. Some of them think the ship is just a natural formation that looks artificial. Others think it's some kind of elaborate trap. They're planning to leave by the end of the week." Jake looked out at the ancient ship. After 3 months of intense study by the 3 most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, it remained completely silent. No lights, no energy signatures, no response to anything. Maybe they were right. Maybe it was just a very old piece of space junk. But something inside Jake refused to accept that. The ship was too perfect, too beautiful. Someone had built it with love and care. Jake could feel it. "Amy, send a message to all 3 fleets," Jake said. "Request permission to conduct our own investigation." Amy looked surprised. "Sir, they've already told us to stay away from the ship." "Just send the message." 20 minutes later, Jake had responses from all 3 alien commanders. Supreme Researcher Veltar's message was cold and dismissive. "Human Morrison, your primitive scanning equipment cannot accomplish what our advanced technology has failed to achieve. However, if you wish to waste your time, you may approach the vessel. Perhaps your failure will teach you proper respect for your betters." The crystalline collective's response was more polite, but equally doubtful. "Small human friends, The ancient song does not respond to our perfect harmony. Your chaotic voices cannot hope to succeed where we have failed. But you may try, so that you may learn wisdom through failure. The Void Watcher's message was the shortest. Young species may attempt what old species have failed. Ancient eyes will watch. Ancient minds will judge. Jake gathered his crew in the shuttle bay. Pete had prepared a small shuttle for the trip to the ancient ship. It was nothing special, just a basic transport with minimal equipment. "Are you sure about this, Jake?" Pete asked. "If that thing is some kind of weapon, we could be flying into a trap." "If it was a weapon, don't you think it would have done something by now?" Jake replied. 3 alien fleets have been poking at it for months. Dr. Wright was already loading her equipment into the shuttle. "I want to take some close-range scans. Maybe we'll see something the long-distance sensors missed." "What if we're wrong?" Amy asked. "What if there really is nothing there?" Jake looked at his crew. They were good people, and they trusted him. He did not want to let them down. But something was calling to him from that ancient ship. He could not explain it, but he could feel it. "Then we'll look foolish for a few hours, and then we'll go home," Jake said. "But if there's even a small chance that we can learn something new, we have to try." The shuttle left the meridian and flew slowly toward the ancient ship. Jake piloted while Amy monitored the sensors and Dr. Wright prepared her scanning equipment. Pete kept an eye on the engines, ready to get them out of there quickly if needed. As they approached the vessel, Jake could see how massive it really was. The shuttle looked like a tiny insect next to the graceful curves of the ancient hull. The material looked even stranger up close, seeming to shift and flow even though it was obviously solid. "Any response on sensors?" Jake asked. "Nothing," Amy replied. "It's as dead as it was from a distance." They were now only a few hundred meters from the ship. Jake had expected to feel afraid, but instead he felt peaceful. The ancient vessel looked welcoming somehow, like it was happy to see them. "Jake," Dr. Wright said quietly, "look at your instruments." Jake looked down at the shuttle's control panel. Several lights that had been dark were now glowing softly. The navigation system was showing readings it had never displayed before. "Amy, are you seeing this?" Amy was staring at her sensor display. "Jake, the ship is lighting up. Look outside." Jake looked through the shuttle's viewport and gasped. Lights were appearing along the ancient ship's hull, starting small and then growing brighter. Sections of the vessel that had been dark for 50,000 years were now glowing with warm, gentle light. "Pete, are we doing something to cause this?" Pete's voice was amazed. "No, sir, our systems are running normal. That ship is turning itself on." As they watched, a section of the ancient vessel became transparent, like looking through clear glass. Inside, they could see corridors and rooms, all lit with the same warm light. Then something happened that made Jake's heart stop. A docking bay opened in the side of the ship, and lights inside began flashing in a pattern that any pilot would recognize. It was an invitation to land. The ancient ship, which had ignored the most advanced technology in the galaxy for 3 months, was welcoming a simple human shuttle. Behind them, Jake could imagine the chaos on the alien ships as their sensors detected what was happening. The dead ship was alive, and it was responding to humans. Jake looked at his crew. Amy was grinning. Pete was laughing. Dr. Wright was taking readings as fast as she could. "Well," Jake said, "I guess we're going inside." Jake Morrison guided the shuttle into the ancient ship's docking bay. The opening was perfectly sized for their small craft, as if someone had measured it in advance. Soft lights along the walls showed them exactly where to land, and the shuttle settled onto the deck with a gentle bump. Through the viewport, Jake could see that the docking bay was beautiful. The walls curved in flowing patterns, and the floor seemed to be made from some kind of smooth stone that glowed with inner light. The air looked clear, and numbers on their instruments showed that it was safe to breathe. "The atmosphere is perfect," Dr. Wright said, checking her readings. 21% oxygen, just like Earth. The temperature is 72 degrees. Even the air pressure is exactly what we're used to. Amy was monitoring communications from the alien fleets. "Commander, they're going crazy out there. All 3 fleets are demanding to know what we did to activate the ship. Supreme Researcher Veltar is threatening to board us by force." Jake thought about this. The alien powers had been trying to unlock the ship for 3 months with no success. Now humans had accomplished in minutes what they could not do at all. The aliens would not be happy about this. "Tell them we don't know what happened either," Jake said. "We're just as surprised as they are." Pete was already putting on his environmental suit. "Should we go outside and take a look around?" Jake nodded. "But we stay together, and we stay in contact with the shuttle at all times. If anything goes wrong, we run." The 4 humans put on their suits and opened the shuttle's airlock. The ancient ship's air was safe to breathe, but Jake wanted to be careful. As soon as they stepped onto the deck, something amazing happened. Lights began to appear along the walls, not harsh and bright, but warm and welcoming. The lights formed patterns that seemed to guide them toward a doorway at the far end of the docking bay. As they walked, Jake noticed that the floor was warm under their feet, even through their thick boots. "It's like the ship is happy to see us," Amy said quietly. The doorway opened as they approached, revealing a corridor that stretched into the distance. The walls were covered with patterns that looked like art, mathematics, and writing all mixed together. But somehow, looking at the patterns made Jake feel calm and peaceful. Dr. Wright was taking readings with her scanner. "Jake, this is incredible. The ship is adapting its systems to match our biology. The air composition is changing slightly to be even more comfortable for humans. The lighting is adjusting to the perfect spectrum for our eyes." As they walked down the corridor, Jake noticed that the ceiling height was exactly right for humans. It was not too low or too high, just comfortable. When Pete, who was the tallest member of the crew, walked under a low section, the ceiling actually rose a few inches to give him more room. "The ship is changing itself for us," Pete said in amazement. "It's like it wants us to feel at home." They came to a large room filled with what looked like control panels and display screens. As they entered, the screens lit up with images and symbols. But these were not alien symbols that they could not understand. Instead, the displays showed star charts that looked familiar, mathematical equations that made sense, and pictures that told stories. Amy walked up to one of the displays. As she got closer, the symbols on the screen changed. They shifted from strange alien writing into English letters and numbers. "Jake, look at this," Amy called. "It's showing me star maps of our local galaxy. But these maps have details I've never seen before. They show planets and civilizations that we don't know about yet." Dr. Wright was studying another display that showed what looked like the history of different species. This one is showing the development of the Zephyrian Empire. But it has information that goes back millions of years, long before they had space travel. Pete found a display that showed engineering diagrams. "Boss, you need to see this. This ship has engines that work on principles I don't understand, but somehow they make perfect sense. It's like the ship is teaching me how they work." Jake walked to the center of the room, where a large circular platform was built into the floor. As he stepped onto it, the entire room changed. The walls became transparent, showing the space outside where the alien fleets waited. But more than that, Jake could suddenly sense the ship itself, as if it was a living thing. A voice spoke, not through speakers, but somehow directly into their minds. It was warm and gentle, like a favorite teacher or a caring parent. "Welcome, humans," the voice said. "I have been waiting for you for a very long time." Jake tried to speak, but found that he could communicate with the ship just by thinking his Words clearly. Who are you? Jake thought. I am the Harbinger, the ship replied. I was built by those who came before, to wait for those who would come after. You are the ones I have been waiting for. Amy stepped closer to the platform. Why us? Why not the Zephyrians or the Crystalline Collective? They're much more advanced than we are. The ship's consciousness seemed to smile, though they could not see it. Advanced in some ways, but not in the ways that matter most. Let me show you what I have learned by watching the galaxy for 50,000 years. The room around them changed, showing images from across the galaxy. They saw the Zephyrian Empire at the height of its power. The Zephyrians had perfect logic and incredible technology, but Jake could see that they had stopped growing. They solved every problem the same way, with pure mathematics and cold reasoning. They had become so focused on being logical that they had forgotten how to imagine new possibilities. The Zephyrians reached the limits of pure logic, the Harbinger explained. They can solve any problem that fits their formulas, but they cannot think beyond their calculations. They have stopped evolving. Next, they saw the Crystalline Collective. The collective consciousness was beautiful and harmonious, but Jake realized that all of their thoughts were the same. They worked together perfectly, but they never disagreed, never argued, and never came up with truly new ideas. The collective achieved perfect unity, the Harbinger said, but they lost the chaos that drives innovation. They think as one, which means they can only think in one way. They too have stopped growing. Finally, they saw the Void Watchers. These ancient beings had incredible knowledge and wisdom, but they spent all their time thinking about what they already knew. They had become so wise that they were afraid to act, worried that any action might be the wrong one. The Watchers gained great wisdom, the Harbinger continued, but wisdom without action is just another form of paralysis. They know so much that they have forgotten how to learn. Jake was beginning to understand. But humans are different? Humans are chaotic, the Harbinger said, and Jake could hear approval in its voice. You argue with each other, you make mistakes, you try things that seem impossible. Other species see this as weakness, but it is your greatest strength. Dr. Wright was looking at displays that showed human history. We're not the smartest species, or the most unified, or the wisest. We're just us. Exactly, the Harbinger said. You are still growing. You still change. You still surprise yourselves with what you can accomplish. The species who built me were looking for someone who could carry on their work of exploration and discovery. They needed someone who would never stop trying to become something better. Pete was studying the engineering displays with growing excitement. This ship, the technology here, it's not just advanced. It's designed to be learned from and improved on. It's not a finished product, it's a starting point. The predecessors built me to be a teacher, the Harbinger confirmed. But I needed students who were ready to learn and grow. The other species have become too set in their ways. You humans are still young enough to change. Amy was looking at the star charts, seeing all the unexplored worlds and unknown civilizations marked on them. There's so much out there that we don't know about. And that excites you rather than frightens you, the Harbinger observed. That is why you are the ones I chose. Jake felt a mixture of pride and responsibility. The ship had been waiting for 50,000 years, and it had chosen humans. But he also thought about the alien fleets outside, and how they would react to this news. The other species won't like this, Jake said. They'll think we're trying to claim power over them. What will you do with the knowledge I can give you? The Harbinger asked. Jake thought about this carefully. The ship could give humans technology that would make them the most powerful species in the galaxy. They could become the new rulers, the way the Zephyrians and others ruled now. But Jake remembered something his grandfather had told him long ago. Real strength comes from helping others be strong too. We want to learn, Jake said finally. But we also want to help others learn. The galaxy would be better if everyone could grow and change together. The Harbinger's approval filled the room like warm sunlight. That answer is why I waited for you, Jake Morrison. You understand that true leadership is not about being above others, but about helping them rise. Up with you. Outside, the alien fleets were demanding answers. Inside the ancient ship, 4 humans were about to learn secrets that would change the galaxy forever. But the most important discovery was not about technology or power. It was about what it truly meant to be worthy of the trust that had been placed in them. Jake Morrison stood on the circular platform as the Harbinger began to share its vast knowledge. Information flowed into his mind, not as confusing data dumps, but as clear understanding that felt natural and right. He could see new ways to travel between stars, methods of generating unlimited clean energy, and technologies that could heal diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. But the ship was showing him something more important than just advanced technology. It was revealing the true history of the galaxy, and that history was nothing like what anyone believed. The predecessors did not just disappear, the Harbinger explained as images filled the room around them. They guided the development of every major species in the galaxy. They planted seeds of life on millions of worlds, hoping that someone would eventually grow into what they themselves had been. Amy watched in amazement as the display showed ancient predecessor ships visiting young worlds. They helped early civilizations develop writing, mathematics, and the first crude technologies. But they never revealed themselves directly or gave too much help at once. They wanted each species to find their own path, Dr. Wright said, understanding the pattern. They were teachers, not rulers. Exactly, the Harbinger confirmed. But as the species grew more advanced, the predecessors began to worry. Each civilization seemed to reach a point where they stopped growing and started repeating the same patterns. Pete was studying engineering displays that showed the history of technological development across the galaxy. They all hit walls. He realized the Zephyrians became so focused on logic that they stopped being creative. The collective became so unified that they stopped having new ideas. The Void Watchers became so wise that they stopped taking risks. Jake could see the sadness in the ship's memories. The predecessors had watched species after species reach great heights, only to become trapped by their own success. Perfect logic led to rigid thinking. Perfect harmony eliminated the conflicts that drove innovation. Perfect wisdom created fear of making mistakes. For millions of years they searched for a species that could break this pattern, the Harbinger continued. They found hints in many races, but always the same result. Excellence in one area led to weakness in others. The ship showed them scenes from recent galactic history. The 3 major powers had been locked in the same basic conflicts for thousands of years. Their technology had improved, but their thinking had not changed. They were trapped in cycles of competition and suspicion that prevented real progress. Then humans appeared, Amy said quietly. Yes, the Harbinger said, and Jake could feel its excitement. You were different from the beginning. You made mistakes, but you learned from them. You argued among yourselves, but you still worked together when it mattered. You were illogical, chaotic, and emotional, but those traits gave you something the others had lost. What? Jake asked. The ability to become something new, the ship replied. You never accept that any problem is impossible to solve. You never stop trying to be better than you were yesterday. Even when you fail, you get up and try again in a different way. Dr. Wright was looking at biological scans of different species. We're not the smartest or the strongest. We're certainly not the most advanced. But you are the most adaptable, the Harbinger said, and adaptation is the key to continued evolution. The predecessors built me to find a species that could carry on their work of nurturing and guiding the galaxy. They needed someone who would never stop growing themselves. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. The ship was offering humanity knowledge that could make them the rulers of the galaxy. But he also understood that this was a test. How they used this power would determine whether they were truly worthy of the predecessor's legacy. Outside the ship, the alien fleets were becoming more agitated. Amy was monitoring their communications and translating for the others. Supreme Researcher Veltar is threatening to board the ship by force, she reported. He says that humans cannot be trusted with ancient technology. The Crystalline Collective is preparing to use their harmonic weapons to try to force their way in. The Void Watchers are just watching, but they're powering up systems we've never seen before. They're afraid, Pete realized. For thousands of years, they've been the most important species in the galaxy. Now some upstart humans have access to technology they can't even understand. Jake thought about the situation carefully. The alien species had every reason to be concerned. From their perspective, a primitive and unpredictable race had just gained access to power that could threaten their entire way of life. Harbinger, Jake said, can you show them what you've shown us? Can you help them understand why you chose humans? They would not believe it coming from me, the ship replied. They would assume it was human trickery or deception. Their fear and pride would prevent them from accepting the truth. Then what do we do? Amy asked. We can't fight all three fleets, and they're not going to just let us leave with all this knowledge. Jake walked around the platform, thinking. The Harbinger had chosen humans because they were different from the other species. But that difference could also be their greatest weapon in this situation. What if we don't try to convince them? Jake said suddenly, what if we show them instead? Dr. Wright looked confused. Show them what? That we're not going to use this power the way they would, Jake explained. The Zephyrians would use it to prove their logical superiority. The collective would use it to force unity on everyone. The Void Watchers would hoard it and use it to maintain their position as the wise elders. But we're going to do something different, Pete said, beginning to understand. We're going to share it, Jake said firmly. Not all at once and not without conditions, but we're going to help them grow too. The Harbinger's approval filled the room. Now you begin to understand the true test. The technology I can give you is powerful, but how you choose to use it will determine whether humanity is truly ready for this responsibility. Jake made his decision. Amy, open a communication channel to all three fleets. I want to speak to their commanders. Within minutes, Jake was looking at holographic images of Supreme Researcher Veltar, the crystal being that spoke for the collective, and the shadowy figure of the Void Watcher representative. Human Morrison, Veltar said coldly, you will explain immediately how you activated the ancient vessel. This technology belongs to the most advanced civilizations, not to primitive species. The ship chose us, Jake said simply. But that doesn't mean we're going to keep its secrets to ourselves. The crystal being of the collective spoke in its harmonic voice. You speak of sharing, but your chaotic nature makes you untrustworthy. How can we believe the promises of a species that cannot even achieve unity among itself? The Void Watcher said nothing, but Jake could feel ancient eyes studying him. Because that's exactly why the ship chose us, Jake replied. We're chaotic, yes. We argue and disagree and make mistakes. But we also help each other learn from those mistakes. We don't want to rule the galaxy. We want to help it grow. Impossible, Veltar said. No species gains power without using it to dominate others. It is the logical result of superiority. Maybe for logical species, Jake said, but humans are not entirely logical. We make decisions based on emotions and instincts that don't always make mathematical sense. Sometimes we do things just because they feel right. Jake paused, then continued. The Harbinger has offered to teach us technologies that could make Earth the most powerful world in the galaxy. We could build weapons. That would make your fleets look like toys. We could develop defenses that would make us impossible to attack. We could become the new rulers of known space. The alien commanders waited, tension filling the space between their ships. But we're not going to do that, Jake said. Instead, we're going to propose something that has never been tried before in galactic history. We want to create a partnership where all species can learn and grow together. Explain, the Void Watcher said, speaking for the first time. The Harbinger will share its knowledge, but not just with humans. We'll create a joint research project where scientists from all our species work together. Each race brings their strengths, and everyone benefits from the discoveries. The Zephyrians bring their logical analysis, Dr. Wright added, understanding Jake's plan. The collective brings their unified perspective. The Void Watchers bring their ancient wisdom. And humans bring our adaptability and willingness to try new approaches. Veltar's expression showed confusion. This makes no logical sense. Why? Would you share power that you could keep for yourselves? Because keeping it for ourselves would make us just like every other dominant species in galactic history, Jake said. We'd eventually become trapped by our own success, just like you have. The Harbinger spoke, its voice somehow reaching all the ships at once. Commander Morrison speaks truly. The choice before humanity is the same choice that faced every species. Before them, they can use this knowledge to dominate, or they can use it to elevate others alongside themselves. The predecessors built me to find a species that would choose elevation over domination, the ship continued. Humanity has passed the first test by making this choice, but the real test will be whether they can make it work. The silence stretched across space as the three alien commanders considered Jake Morrison's proposal. Jake could feel his heart beating faster as he waited for their response. Everything they had discovered, everything the Harbinger had taught them, would be meaningless if the galaxy's powers chose to continue their old ways of thinking. Supreme Researcher Veltar was the first to speak. His logical mind was clearly working through the possibilities, calculating risks and benefits with mathematical precision. This proposal lacks logical foundation, Veltar said slowly. Sharing advanced knowledge with potential competitors violates all established principles of galactic politics. However, he paused, and Jake could see something new in the alien's large black eyes. The current system has produced no significant advancement in 3,000 years. Perhaps illogical approaches deserve consideration. The crystal being representing the collective hummed with harmonic vibrations as thousands of minds discussed Jake's proposal at the speed of thought. The human chaos frightens us, the collective admitted. Your species argues and disagrees in ways that cause us discomfort. But we have observed that your disagreements often lead to solutions that none of us considered. If the ancient ship believes you are worthy, perhaps we should attempt to understand why. All eyes turned to the Void Watcher. The ancient being had said little during the entire encounter, but Jake knew that their decision would carry enormous weight. The Watchers had been observing the galaxy longer than any other species. Young human, the Watcher said in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, you offer something that has not been attempted in 50,000 years. We have watched species rise and fall, always following the same patterns. Perhaps it is time to break those patterns. Jake felt relief wash over him, but he knew the real work was just beginning. Getting the alien powers to agree was only the first step. Making the partnership actually work would be much harder. Harbinger, Jake said, are you willing to help all of us learn together? The ancient ship's consciousness filled with warmth. This is what the predecessors hoped for when they built me. I was never meant to serve just one species. I was meant to help the galaxy grow beyond its limitations. Over the next several hours, Jake and his crew worked with representatives from all three alien fleets to establish the basic framework of their partnership. The Harbinger would become a mobile research station, traveling to different systems and helping various species develop new technologies and ideas. Dr. Wright suggested that they start with small projects to build trust. "We could work together on medical research first," she said. "Everyone benefits from better ways to heal people, and it's not threatening to anyone's security." Amy proposed that they establish communication protocols that would help the different species understand each other better. "Half of our conflicts come from misunderstandings," she pointed out. "If we can learn to really talk to each other, we can solve problems before they become wars." Pete was excited about the engineering possibilities. "Imagine what we could build if we combined Zephyrian mathematics with collective harmony and human creativity. We could design ships and cities that none of us could create alone." But Jake knew that the biggest challenge would not be technical. It would be changing the way entire civilizations thought about their place in the galaxy. The first test came sooner than expected. A small crisis developed when some Zephyrian scientists insisted that their logical methods were superior to human intuition. They wanted to study the Harbinger using pure mathematical analysis, while the human researchers preferred to explore and experiment. Jake watched the argument develop and realized this was exactly the kind of conflict that could destroy their partnership before it really began. But then something unexpected happened. Dr. Wright stepped forward with a suggestion. "What if we're both right?" she said. "What if the Harbinger is so advanced that it needs both logical analysis and intuitive exploration to be fully understood?" The Harbinger confirmed this insight. "Dr. Wright speaks correctly. My creators designed me to require multiple approaches for complete understanding. No single method of thinking can unlock all my secrets." This became the pattern for their work. Together, when the collective's unified thinking reached an impasse, human chaos would suggest new directions. When human creativity ran wild, Zephyrian logic would provide structure and focus. When both younger species became stuck, Void Watcher wisdom would offer perspective from their vast experience. 6 months after the first meeting, Jake stood on the Harbinger's bridge as the ship approached a star system that had never been visited by any galactic power. They had received a signal from a young species that was just beginning to explore space, and the partnership had agreed to make contact together. "It feels strange," Amy said, looking at the displays that showed the alien world ahead. 6 months ago, we were the newcomers asking for respect. Now we're the ones making first contact with an even younger species. Jake nodded. The irony was not lost on him. Humanity had gone from being ignored by the galactic powers to helping lead a new kind of galactic community in less than a year. Supreme researcher Veltar approached them on the bridge. In the months they had worked together, the cold Zephyrian had become something Jake had never expected, a friend. "Commander Morrison," Veltar said, "I must admit that I was incorrect in my initial assessment of your species. Human illogic has proven to be a form of logic that my people had never considered. And your mathematical precision has helped us turn our crazy ideas into things that actually work," Jake replied. "Neither of us could have accomplished this alone." The crystal representative of the collective had also changed. Instead of speaking only in the unified voice of their entire civilization, they had begun to express individual thoughts and opinions. The contact with humans had taught them that disagreement could be productive rather than destructive. Even the Void Watchers had become more active participants rather than just observers. Their ancient knowledge, combined with fresh perspectives from the younger species, had led to discoveries that surprised everyone. But the most important change was in the galaxy itself. Word of the partnership had spread to dozens of smaller species that had been ignored by the major powers. Many of them were now requesting to join the new alliance, not as subordinates, but as equal partners in exploration and discovery. As the Harbinger approached the new world, Jake thought about how much had changed. The ship had been waiting for 50,000 years for someone to pass its test. Humanity had passed by choosing cooperation over domination. But the real victory was not in being chosen. It was in proving that the choice could work. Incoming. "Transmission from the planet," Amy reported. "They're asking who we are and what we want." Jake smiled as he looked around the bridge. Zephyrian scientists worked alongside human engineers. Collective artists collaborated with Void Watcher historians. Representatives from a dozen different species were learning from each other and creating things that none of them could have. "Imagine alone. Tell them we're explorers," Jake said. "Tell them we're here to learn about them and to help them learn about the galaxy. Tell them we believe that everyone deserves a chance to grow and become something greater than they were before." As the message was transmitted, Jake felt the Harbinger's consciousness touch his mind one more time. The predecessors would be proud. The ship said, "You have done what they always hoped someone would do. You have chosen to lift others up instead of standing above them." Jake looked out at the stars, knowing that somewhere among them, other species were taking their first steps into space, making their first discoveries, and facing their first choices about what kind of civilization they wanted to become. The galaxy was changing, one world at a time, one species at a time, one choice at a time. And humanity, the youngest and most chaotic species in known space, had become the teachers they had always needed, teachers who helped others find their own paths, rather than forcing them to follow someone else's. The ancient ship sailed on through the cosmos, carrying its mixed crew of dreamers and thinkers, mathematicians and artists, toward whatever new wonders waited among the stars. The age of domination was ending, and the age of cooperation was just beginning. And in the depths of space, in dimensions beyond physical reality, the predecessors watched their children with pride, knowing that their long wait had finally come to an end.